Welcome back to the Captain's Council. I'm the Captain's Coach, and this is session number 8. I'm really excited to talk to you all today about learning and skill acquisition and some principles that I think are vital that you all understand as what we do every single day is learn, grow, and improve. And I think that these are important for both your team and for you as an individual to be able to frame and be more intentional about the way that you are practicing and learning so that you can optimize your growth for success. But to start, we want to go through and reflect on how the team's been doing. And so some of these are based off of last session's topics in regards to communications and pre-game speeches. These are, halftime and timeouts. How are they organized and how can they improve? The second is to think from between 1 and 10 about how strong you think your communication skills are and where you think that you can improve. And the third is to look back on the season thus far and pinpoint what you think is the best team moment and why or what made it so great. The next exercise is to talk through and provide an overview of what you remember from session 7. And in particular, what are the 3 components of communication? Name a couple of the principles out of the 10 that I provided in regards to the principles of pregame speeches. And then thirdly, name 3 mental skills that you feel like you need to work on developing. Once you've completed that, I want to jump into skill acquisition. And I want us to really think about how the body best adapts so that we can be more efficient and effective with the time that we put into improving our skill set. And for those who have never heard of this methodology called Train Ugly, it's by Trevor Reagan. And I'll be using a couple of, or some of his work here. And I highly recommend that you go and look some of his work up online. But to start, I want to quickly talk about why what's one thing that really holds us back many times when it comes to improvement. And a lot of this stems from fear and this thing that Trevor Reagan calls the lizard brain. And really it's our amygdala. It's this primal part of our brain that only that really drives and brings awareness to fear in particular, but it can't distinguish between good and bad fear. And 4 things that it hates are attention, uncertainty, struggle, change, all 4 of which are things that we need because that is this zone of uncomfortable and it's this aspect and area where we need to be in order to really grow. And unfortunately, our amygdala can't distinguish, those 4 things against us, seeing a bear or a snake. And so it can't distinguish those. So a lot of times these 4 things that we need and should be striving towards and having the courage to go through, our brains just move us in a different direction because it's afraid of it and doesn't want us to go through those 4 things. And ultimately, it's not about trying to become fearless. It is about the integration of fear and having the courage. And when I say courage, I mean realizing that there are things that you value more than fear that should push you to enacting types of behaviors and processes that we talk about. And push you to get uncomfortable so that you can grow. The second is called contextual interference. And this is all about the fact that variable tasks are better than just individual or singular tasks. And that tough tasks are usually better than easy. And sometimes it's very useful to get thrown into the end of the pool. And as long as you have a mentor there, to kind of help you in a sense and make sure that you don't drown, throw you into the deep end and get you to swim. The third is random versus block training. And so random, as you can think, is randomizing and providing some variety within the training, um, versus block, which is again very singular of nature, very mechanical. And this also has to do with these three things that we do when we approach any type of technical movement, which is that we read, we plan, and then we do. So it's more than just the technique that we have. If you are a baseball player and you're hitting, what you have to do is it's more than just a swing. You are reading the pitcher, his arm motion, and then as at his release point, you are planning what you're going to do in a split second. And then there's the technical aspect of swinging the bat to make contact. And that read and plan is 2/3 of the equation. And a lot of times, individuals or programs that only focus and break down the technical aspect but don't allow for the reading and the planning are missing out on crucial and key aspects of the skill in its entirety that is needed to be able to really improve in that overarching or overall motor skill. The next one is whole versus part. And this is kind of in relation to this read, plan, do, that it's better to conduct the whole skill versus breaking it down into individual tasks. And that kind of goes back to this idea of the law of specificity. And finally, we can't grow unless we fail and we make mistakes. And so you have to have a growth mindset. And archiving feedback from failure is really what it takes to learn. The main takeaway that I'd like you all to have is that practice is not about looking good. And I can't tell you how many programs are constantly looking for perfection within practice. And it's not that we're not striving for perfection, but oftentimes coaches, athletes try to limit or lower the bar that practice of the practice itself so that they can perfect it. And we need to make sure that that we are pushing every single day and allowing for failure to occur. And as long as we're getting feedback and growing and learning from those mistakes, that's what's ultimately going to increase skill retention and transfer. So at this point in time, take 5 to 10 minutes and really think about all of the components, frameworks, models that I just provided you, and think about how you can utilize these to improve your current training pipeline and practices. Once you've completed that, then I'd like to get into learning, which is a little bit different than the skill acquisition, although very much relatable. But there's certainly a knowledge component of everything that you're doing, and learning that is going to be important. So how do we learn best? And so here are some learning techniques, models that I am a fan of. The first is the CAFE model. And so with everything that you're trying to learn, think about what is the 20% of this of what we're trying to learn that is the most important. Then think about what the minimum effective dose is. So how often do I need to learn about this? And so is it if it initially is planned for 2 weeks of learning, if I compress it to 20%, what then does that look like in terms of frequency? And then should I do that 20 minutes on day 1, 30 minutes on day 3, an hour on day 5? So we just want to think about, well, what's the minimum effective dose to get me to the end state that I'm looking for there? And then encoding is about how can you anchor to existing knowledge? And one thing that I think about when it comes to encoding is called mental models, which is something that I use quite frequently, which essentially is just a simple framework that reflects the way the world works, And what we can do is we have all of these different mental models. It's called a lattice work of models. And what we want to do is, as we learn new things, new models, we want to attach that to our lattice work. And so that's what we want to do when it comes to this encoding piece for CAFE. And then this method is very similar, in which it says, we want to deconstruct and figure out what's the minimum learning selection. So what's the 20% you need to learn? How should we sequence those that 20%? And then what are the consequences for you to learn or not learn? Necessity is one of the 6 habits of high performers. And so we should always think about, why is it necessary that we are enacting anything or taking any action at all, right? We always want to have clarity on that. And so this is something that incorporates that idea as well. And the final model is 70-20-10, which is essentially states that whatever you have planned, 70 to train, 70% should be actual experience of you performing that skill, task, or knowledge base. The second is feedback and getting feedback from mentors. And then finally, 10% is education and the lecture-based models. And that kind of leads us to this learning pyramid, which I'm sure most of you have seen before, which states that when we think about how we retain information, lecture is usually the most ineffective way for us to do that. Even with all of these Captain's Council sessions, this is all just for your awareness. Ultimately, we don't learn through this capacity. We learn by doing, but hopefully, these councils are useful for implanting certain models into your awareness, so that then coaches and you can utilize those and reflect on those, but ultimately it won't be retained until you actually do it and then continue to reflect on that. And so the 70-20-10 method really matches this learning pyramid, which states that essentially you hear, you forget, you see, you remember, you do, you understand. The next one's called the Shu-Ha-Ri methodology, which is pretty cool. And one of something that I'm a big fan of. And so when we're approaching learning something new, we want to start by obeying the conventional rules and taking, listening and learning from those who have done it before and the best way that they found to do that. And that's the Shu piece. And then the next one is the Ha, which is that where we start to break free from those rules, and we become there's this conscious intentionality to making it our own and putting our own spin on it, so to speak. And then Ri is being able to finally transcend the traditional rules to find your own individual path. And I think it's really a useful thing as we look to really reaching another level in our skill sets and understanding. And another quote that I think fits well here is this one by Bruce Lee that says that a good teacher protects his pupils from his own influence. And this is something that I give to a lot of coaches to really get them to, ponder this question of, if all you do as coaches is push information down to individuals, where is the creativity and spark, and how can you be holding them back in many ways from unleashing this unknown potential within them? And so it's a very much a balance between understanding the fundamentals and getting very experienced in those. And then as you grow with time and experience, then moving into putting your own spin, so to speak, and creativity into your craftsmanship. And finally, I want to talk about some learning trumps. And so the first is that movement trumps sitting. Talking trumps listening. Images trumps words. Writing trumps reading. shorter trumps longer and different trumps the same. And I think these are very simple ways that communicate basically this idea that, we want to put our athletes, and if for you athletes and team captains, you want to try your best to force yourself into an environment of learning where you are being actively engaged and not passively consuming as often as possible, and that you're doing different things as well. So those are some trumps I think that will hopefully be useful for you as you try to improve your process for learning. And then your final exercise here is to think about these learning principles that we just talked through, and think about how you can leverage these again for within your team to make your program the best that it can be, and gain that 1% advantage over others. And so in conclusion here, I think the three big ones are realizing that there's more than just the technical aspect of a skill, the doing, so to speak. You also have to read the situation and plan your execution. And those are skill sets as well that you really need to consider and improve upon if you want the whole skill to improve. The next one is just the fact that we learn by doing, and that all of any training that we have, 70% at least should be about doing that skill. 20% of the time that you are specifically giving to training should be on feedback, and the final 10% should be on the education and lecture to just provide some awareness and fundamentals that are required to move forward. And the Shu Ha Ri, I think, is really interesting as we try to think about how we can, again, become experts in those fundamentals and then move and add on our own creativity and approach to that skill set itself. So I hope that you enjoyed this session as we learned how to learn better so that you can ultimately grow as effectively and efficiently as possible. And until next time, I appreciate it and hope that you all are having a great season thus far. Thanks again.